Have you ever noticed how some people seem to have it all together, but if you look just a little bit closer, they're actually vibrating at a frequency of pure anxiety? I mean, you know the type. They've got the promotion, the clean apartment, the perfectly curated morning routine, but they're also the person who has a minor existential crisis if they get a single piece of constructive feedback, or, God forbid, an email from their boss that just says, "We need to talk." It's like they're living in a world where anything less than absolute perfection feels like a total catastrophe. You're sitting there, staring at a screen, and your cursor is just blinking at you. It's mocking you, honestly. You've been working on this presentation or this project for 6 hours, and it's objectively fine. It's actually more than fine. It's great. But there's this tiny nagging voice in the back of your head saying it could be better, that it has to be better. If you just find a slightly different shade of blue for the header, or if you rephrase that one sentence on slide 12 for the 10th time, then maybe, just maybe, you'll feel like you've actually earned your spot in the room. It's a weird kind of exhaustion, isn't it, to be so successful on paper but feel like you're constantly one mistake away from being found out. My name is Frankie, and I spend way too much time thinking about the invisible scripts we run on, especially that one about being a straight-A student, and how that identity which served us so well in school can eventually turn into a prison of our own making. I want to talk about why that drive for excellence, which felt like a superpower when we were 16, might actually be the thing holding you back from a life that actually feels good to live. Basically, I want to explore what happens when the gold stars stop being handed out by teachers, and we have to figure out how to validate ourselves in a world that doesn't come with a rubric. It's a shift that sounds simple, but honestly, it's one of the hardest things a high achiever will ever have to do. The thing about being a straight-A student isn't just about the grades themselves, it's about the identity that gets built around them. Think back to when you were a kid. Maybe you were the one who always had the neatest handwriting, or the one who finished the math worksheet first. You got used to the praise. You got used to the way your parents' eyes lit up when they saw the report card. And slowly, without even realizing it, you started to believe that your value as a human being was directly tied to your performance. You weren't just a kid who happened to be good at school. You were the smart kid. That was your brand. And the problem with having a brand based on being the best is that you can never afford to be second best. It creates this constant underlying pressure to maintain the image. It's like you're carrying a heavy backpack full of everyone's expectations, and you're terrified that if you put it down for even a second, you'll disappear. I mean, who are you if you aren't the high achiever? If you strip away the titles and the accolades and the external markers of success, what's actually left? That's a terrifying question for a lot of people. It leads to this thing psychologists call contingent self-esteem, where your sense of worth is basically a roller coaster that goes up and down based on your latest win or loss. It's a fragile way to live. One bad day at work doesn't just feel like a bad day, it feels like a character flaw. It feels like evidence that you were a fraud all along. Honestly, it's exhausting to live in a state of constant self-surveillance, always checking to see if you're still measuring up to some invisible standard that you probably didn't even set for yourself. And then there's the rubric problem. School is great because it tells you exactly what you need to do to win. You want an A? Fine. Do these 5 things, cite 3 sources, and turn it in by Friday. There's a syllabus for life. But then you graduate, and suddenly, the syllabus is gone. There are no clear instructions on how to be a good friend, or how to find a career that actually fulfills you, or how to deal with the messy, unpredictable nature of adult relationships. In the real world, you can do everything right and still fail, or you can do everything wrong and somehow stumble into success. This lack of a grading scale can be absolutely paralyzing for the straight A types. We're so used to looking for the right answer that we forget that in most parts of life, there isn't one. There are just choices and consequences. I've seen so many brilliant people stay in jobs they hate or relationships that are draining them because they're waiting for someone to give them a gold star for their suffering. They think if they just work harder, if they just optimize their schedule a little bit more, someone will eventually come along and tell them they've won. But there is no graduation ceremony for adulthood. There's no dean's list for being a well-adjusted human being. We spend so much time trying to solve the puzzle of our lives that we forget the puzzle doesn't actually have a picture on the box. We're just making it up as we go. Basically, we're applying a school mindset to a world that doesn't operate on school rules, and it's making us miserable. I remember this one time a few years ago when I was trying to start a new hobby. I decided I wanted to learn how to paint with watercolors. I bought all the expensive brushes, the high-quality paper, the fancy paints. I watched hours of tutorials, and then, when I finally sat down to actually paint something, I couldn't do it. I was so afraid of making something ugly, of being bad at it, that I just sat there staring at the blank paper for an hour. It sounds ridiculous, right? It was just paper and paint, but my brain was treating it like a final exam. I had this deeply ingrained belief that if I couldn't be good at it immediately, there was no point in doing it at all. This is the dark side of the straight A burden, the death of curiosity. When you're focused on the outcome, you lose the joy of the process. You stop taking risks because risks might lead to failure, and failure is the one thing you've been taught to avoid at all costs. But the irony is that growth only happens when you're willing to be bad at something. If you only ever do things you're already good at, you're not growing, you're just repeating yourself. You're living in a gilded cage of your own competence. Honestly, some of the most interesting things in life happen in the messy middle, in the mistakes and the failures that lead you to something you never could have planned. But if you're too busy trying to get an A, you'll miss all of that. You'll end up with a very impressive resume and a very hollow sense of self. This leads to what a lot of people call gifted kid burnout. It's that feeling when the engine finally runs out of steam. You've been sprinting since the 3rd grade, and suddenly you're 30 years old and you just can't do it anymore. The things that used to motivate you, the praise, the promotions, the fear of falling behind, they just don't work like they used to. You feel like a phone that won't hold a charge. You're doing the work, but there's no spark behind it. It's a very specific kind of depression, I think. It's not necessarily a deep sadness, but more of a profound numbness. It's the realization that you've been climbing a ladder for your entire life, only to realize that the ladder is leaning against the wrong wall. You've been so focused on being successful that you never stop to ask what success actually means to you. Is it the big house, the fancy title, or is it something else entirely, like freedom or connection, or just the ability to spend a Tuesday afternoon reading a book without feeling guilty about it? For the straight A burdened, guilt is like a constant companion. It's the voice that tells you that you should be doing more, even when you've already done everything. It's the feeling that rest is something you have to earn, rather than a basic human need. We treat ourselves like machines that need to be optimized, rather than living, breathing people who need to be nourished. I mean, let's talk about the average fear. To a former straight A student, the word average is basically a slur. We were always told we were special or gifted, and we internalized this idea that being ordinary was the worst possible outcome. But here's the thing, most of life is lived in the average. Most of our days are pretty mundane. We eat breakfast, we go to work, we do chores, we sleep. If you can only find value in being exceptional, you're going to spend about 99% of your life feeling like a failure. It's a recipe for chronic dissatisfaction. I've had to learn, very slowly and painfully, that there is actually a lot of beauty in being average. There's a certain peace in realizing that you don't have to be the most remarkable person in the room to be worthy of love and respect. You don't have to justify your existence with a list of achievements. You can just be. But man, that is a hard pill to swallow when you've been conditioned to believe that your giftedness is your only ticket to belonging. We're so afraid that if we stop being extraordinary, people will stop caring about us. We think our relationships are based on what we can provide or how much we can achieve, rather than who we are. It's a very lonely way to live, because you never feel like people actually see the real you, the messy, flawed, average you that exists behind the mask of success. So how do we actually break out of this? How do we stop being straight A students and start being humans? It starts with a really uncomfortable process of unlearning. You have to start questioning those voices in your head. When that voice says you're failing because you took a nap or because you didn't get that promotion, you have to talk back to it. You have to ask, whose standards am I failing? And do those standards actually matter to me? It's about moving from external validation to internal satisfaction. This means learning how to give yourself your own gold stars. It means finding things to do that have absolutely no productive value. For me, that meant finally picking up those watercolors again and intentionally making something terrible. I mean, it was really bad. The colors were muddy, the perspective was off, and I loved every second of it because it was mine. It wasn't for a grade, it wasn't for Instagram, it was just for the sake of doing it. We need to reclaim the right to be beginners. We need to reclaim the right to be mediocre. It's okay to be a B- friend or a C+ cook sometimes. The world won't end. In fact, you might find that the world actually gets a lot bigger when you're not looking at it through the narrow lens of perfection. Basically, what I'm saying is that we need to lower the stakes. Most of the things we stress about, the emails, the deadlines, the social expectations, they aren't life or death. But our nervous systems treat them like they are because we've tied our survival to our performance. We have to teach our bodies that we are safe even when we aren't winning. This is why things like mindfulness or just spending time in nature can be so helpful for high achievers. The trees don't care about your GPA. The ocean doesn't give a damn about your job title. They just exist. And when you're in their presence, you can start to feel that maybe you can just exist too. It's a practice though. It's not something you just get and then you're cured. I still have days where I feel that old familiar panic rising up because I think I'm not doing enough. I still have to remind myself that my worth isn't a math equation. It's a constant process of choosing to be kind to yourself, especially when you feel like you least deserve it. Honestly, being kind to yourself is the one subject they never taught us in school, and it's the one we need the most. It's also about changing the way we look at failure. We need to stop seeing it as a dead end and start seeing it as data. When something doesn't work out, it doesn't mean you're a failure. It just means that particular path didn't lead where you wanted it to go. It's information. It's a chance to pivot. But you can only see it that way if you've decoupled your identity from the outcome. If your identity is the person who always wins, then a loss is an existential threat. But if your identity is the person who is curious and keeps trying, then a loss is just a detour. It sounds like a small shift in wording, but it changes everything about how you experience your life. It allows you to breathe. It allows you to be more present in your actual life, rather than always living in the future version of yourself who has finally made it. Because the truth is, there is no made it, there's just here. And if you aren't okay here, you won't be okay there either. I think a lot about how we treat our hobbies and our passions like side hustles now. Everything has to be monetized or optimized. If you're good at something, people tell you that you should start a business or a YouTube channel or a TikTok. It's like we can't just enjoy things anymore. We have to turn them into another arena for achievement. This is just the straight A burden in a different outfit. It's the same old pressure to be the best, to get the most likes, to have the most followers. We've turned our leisure time into a second job. And I think we need to fight back against that. We need to protect the things we love from the achievement mindset. We need things that are just for us, things that we are allowed to be bad at without any consequences. Whether it's gardening or playing video games or just walking around the neighborhood, we need spaces where the grade doesn't matter. We need spaces where we are allowed to be unproductive. Honestly, I think unproductivity is one of the most radical things a former straight-A student can practice. It's a way of saying, I am more than what I produce. So, where does that leave us? It leaves us with a choice. We can keep running on the treadmill, chasing the next gold star, the next promotion, the next piece of external validation, until we eventually burn out for good. Or we can choose to step off. We can choose to start building a life that is based on our own values rather than someone else's rubric. It's not easy. It's actually terrifying to let go of the thing that has given you a sense of security for your entire life. But on the other side of that fear is a lot of freedom. There's the freedom to be messy, the freedom to be curious, and the freedom to finally be enough just as you are. You don't have to earn your place on this planet. You're already here. That's your A+. The rest of it is just extra credit. As we wrap this up, I want you to take a second to really think about the last time you did something just because it made you feel alive, not because it made you look good or because it was on your to-do list. If it's been a while, that's okay. Most of us are in the same boat. We've been trained to prioritize the result over the being, but the weight you're carrying, that heavy backpack of expectations, and the constant need to prove yourself, you're allowed to put it down. You really are. The world won't stop spinning if you decide to be good enough for a while. In fact, you might find that you actually have more to give when you aren't trying to give everything all the time. The transition from being a straight A student to being a whole human is a long journey, and it's one that doesn't have a clear map. But it's the most important work you'll ever do. It's the work of coming home to yourself. So tomorrow, when that familiar pressure starts to build, when you feel that need to be perfect creeping in, I want you to try something. Just for a moment, let yourself be average. Let yourself be human. Give yourself the permission that no teacher or boss ever will. You might be surprised at how much lighter you feel when you're not trying to be perfect. You're doing better than you think you are, honestly. You've spent so long trying to pass every test that you might have forgotten that life isn't a test at all. It's just a story you're writing, and you're allowed to have some messy drafts along the way. Be gentle with yourself, you're getting there.